Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing. And I see Victor. You can hear me okay? Victor on Zoom, can you hear me okay? So it's really, yes, not, they can't hear me that well. Dr. Holt, can you chime in just what it sounds like on your end? Is it too low? Then I can't hear at all. So Dr. Holt, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Thumb to the side if it's too low. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing. And I see Dr. Holt's mouth moving, but I can't hear her either. I can hear her. Testing, testing. Dr. Holt, can you hear me?
That was worse.
Oh, now we can hear her.
We can hear her.
Oh, you couldn't hear me all that time.
Tell us what it sounds like, please. Can you? Is it too low?
Too low.
Okay. So too low for them. All right. All right. Yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
very well.
Yep. So again, welcome everyone who's here in person. It's good to see you all. We're going to get started momentarily, just doing a few sound check moments to make sure our Zoom family
Victor.
can
You
join.
are getting it. I'm going to try not to say anything more because I'm just going to mess with you.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Look at Victor.
Now we can hear you.
Victor and Dr. Holt like, yay, all right. All righty. All right. All right. So you all are going to be starting, so I will start.
Let's see. So, all right. Welcome, everybody, to thank you for joining us for the third in our series of community forums honoring all voices, exploring respect, fairness, and inclusion in Lake County. My name is Joanne Sakato. I use the pronouns she, her. I was born in Lakeport, raised in Clearlake, and I reside in Cobb. This evening we're gathered together in what is commonly known as the city of Clearlake, but I'd also like to acknowledge the fuller history of this land and the people by recognizing we are on the present day and ancestral lands of the southeastern Pomo and Lake Miwok nations. I'd like to thank our hosts from the city of Clearlake, the city council members and staff who have worked to create this welcoming opportunity for us to be in this space tonight. The work we're setting out to do tonight is a culmination of over 2 years of preparation by a growing group of committed people, including a grassroots coalition of concerned residents asking for action, our county supervisors and staff, most notably Matthew Rothstein, our staff member there, the Lakeport and Clearlake City Council members and their staff, local law enforcement, community organizations, and our consultants at Nicole, Anderson and Associates, who you'll meet in just a bit. We're in deep gratitude to everyone who has been involved in this process. And while tonight's forum is a part of the final stages of the Lake County Community Vision Forum Planning Committee's charge, many of our committee and engaged community members see this work and these conversations as only the beginning. We look forward to finding ways to build momentum, to continue the momentum that we've started, and to glean from our learnings that we've had through this process. And we hope that you'll be inspired to join us in continued efforts. You're authentic. If it's not technology, it's the right. Thank you, Sam. This is commitment. You see the commitment to this process? Okay. Okay. Thank you. This is commitment, right? This is commitment. So your authentic engagement tonight is deeply valued. We thank you for this opportunity to create safe community space and learn more about your lived experiences here in Lake County. And just to note ahead of time, which is what I've been doing all along, is that we're all going to be caught learning together through this process. We're in new territory together. And the best we can do is to bring our courage, curiosity, and willingness to learn to the table. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge and give thanks to Supervisor Sabatier for answering the call to action on behalf of the Board of Supervisors. He did so with the proclamation and with the formation of the Lake County Community Vision Forum Planning Committee. And with that, I deeply welcome you to this process tonight, and I'm going to hand it off to Supervisor Sabatier.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I want to express to you, they gave me 3 minutes, but it's probably going to be impossible. But I want to express to you why this is important to me, why it was important to me, and I just want to give a brief story about my life. And it sounds weird, but I'll get to the explanation. I wasn't always white. I was an immigrant before I was white. I came here from France, and my first interaction in going to American school, because I didn't always go to American school, every single one of my friends, except for one, and I lived in a white community, majority white community, were Latinx, African American, and Asian. Now, I didn't catch on until later on in life. I had to kind of reflect on my life and kind of express what my upbringing was like and what I experienced. And I realized that as an immigrant, I felt and I was treated as an outcast. What became sad to me was, upon this reflection, was to recognize that my friends who were born and raised in America, some of them who were not immigrants, felt exactly the same way, and the reason they befriended me and why I became friends with them. And it's important to know and recognize that we have people here who have for generations lived in this country, lived in this city, and still don't get treated like they are, quote unquote, American citizens. And we can do better than that. We should always create a space that is safe for everyone to express themselves in. When I was in 4th grade, again, I expressed who the majority of my friends were. I had one of my friends who was African American. I knew him as Imani. And he decided to move on to the middle school. Not everybody had to at that time. And myself and Imani, even though I was in 4th grade, he would stand up for him. When people would make fun of me, they would call me Bruno Burrito. That expresses a little bit of how and why I was treated the way I was treated. And so it made me miss Imani when he left. And sometimes we would cross on the crosswalk. When he's coming home from middle school, I'd come home from elementary school. We'd give each other a high five. Eventually, I made it to middle school. And it's like Imani didn't exist anymore. He changed his name. He changed his hairstyle. His name was Toby. As far as I'm concerned, Imani was not an Americanized name. His hair was curly, no longer the African-looking style that he used to carry when he was at elementary school. And when I walked up to him one day and said, because people change their looks fast when they're in middle school, I said, "Aren't you Imani?" He was upset. "Don't ever say that name to me again." that was not that long ago. I'm not exactly a young fellow, I'm not exactly an old fellow, but 20 years ago, that was the world that I experienced through my eyes and recognized today that that was the reality of the people that I was friends with. And that's still the same reality today. And I think that we can do better. I just was expressing to a lot of people, I just went to New Orleans. I love engaging in different cultures. I love having new experiences and seeing the world from a different angle, because our angle is not always the right angle, and it's not always the exact angle everyone should see something from. We should allow perspectives to be what they are. We should allow people to behave and do what they do, because it is what they know. It's what they've been raised with. And so I love that we're here having this conversation today, and I hope that we do create a safe space for everyone to express themselves, but I hope that we can learn and be better as individuals so that the rest of the people in our community, we can create that safe space for them no matter where we are. So I want to thank Joanne for approaching me and pushing me. She didn't have to push hard, to help create this. Obviously, thankful for the Board of Supervisors' support in making this happen. And I am going to pass this on to Matthew Rothstein, our Deputy County Administrator, who has really helped and been the force behind this and putting all this together and organizing.
Thank you, Supervisor Sabatier, and thank you, Joanne, for your important, meaningful, and powerful words, and for your commitment and your call to further action. You're both amazing Lake County leaders and advocates for justice, and it is an honor, truly, to spend this evening and share this event with you. I'm also honored and humbled by the generosity of each one of the singular and remarkable people that are gathered here in person and in Zoom. Thank you to each of you for being here tonight and for entering this space with open hearts. Your presence and your contributions are essential. As Joanne noted, tonight's third Honoring All Voices Forum is in some respects a culminating event. It is also a challenge, particularly to any of us that are privileged with formal or informal leadership roles in Lake County, to continue to seek opportunities where we can, to take meaningful actions and promote activities that will build bridges where there may be walls, to foster tolerance, respect, understanding, equity, and inclusion, promote nonviolence and nonviolent conflict resolution, focus resources on underlying causes and conditions that lead to inequitable resource and justice distribution, and relevant solutions for any social injustices as they may come to light. To the dozens of county, city, tribal government, and community leaders that have made the Honoring All Voices series possible, thank you for your extraordinary work. Thank you for your investment, and thank you for your thought partnership over all of these months. I also want to particularly thank a few people that have helped create availability for the rest of us, in many ways have helped these forums reach more people. And those include Stephanie Griffin, Cynthia Dominguez, and Maria Griffin for generously co-leading provision of childcare throughout this series. I want to also thank, of course, the city of Clearlake for providing this wonderful venue, and Robinson Rancheria for providing the venue for our first forum, and the County of Lake for our other event. I also want to thank Chairman Cromwell and Robinson Rancheria for providing food and beverages throughout this series. It's helped to sustain what is truly an important conversation. And I want to thank our incredible team of interpreters. We have Gilbert and Janeth from Equilingual, and also tonight, Trani and Jacob from Pro Bono ASL. Thank you for being here. And now, with deep thanks to the Lake County Board of Supervisors and the city councils of the cities of Clearlake and Lakeport for their financial support, it's my privilege to introduce you to our lead facilitator for this evening's event, Ms. Nicole Anderson. Nicole and her team, including the esteemed Dr. Shelley Holt, who is facilitating our Zoom room this evening, have been indispensable leaders in the movement to promote cultural competency and greater understanding in communities, school districts, local governments, and other organizations across the state of California and beyond. Nicole, welcome. We're very grateful you're here.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, and good evening. It's great to see you all, and I'm going to try to not hide behind these cameras. Just stand right about here. Is that all right? All right. So just really good to see you all again. I know that we are a small but mighty group today, so I look forward to another family conversation and taking the conversation a little deeper this time as we continue to hear the voices of the community. So again, I'm Nicole Anderson. I am the CEO of our company, Nicole Anderson and Associates. I'm joined by Dr. Shelley Jones-Holt, who you'll see on the screen in a moment. And we have had the honor of partnering with Lake County to really support the conversations that need to happen, but also the work of the committee who have really come together to start to brainstorm what are those actions we can recommend to really create that sustainable change in our community. And I want to underscore the word sustainable. Because often what we've seen in this movement of work is we have great conversations with task force and committees, and we have forums and town hall meetings. And then what happens when we all go home, right? Do the conditions change for the community that's not in this room right now? Because I do honor and recognize the voices that aren't here for a reason. There's some structures and systems in place. Maybe a lack of safety, right? A lack of trust, right? And where does my voice fit? And so we know we have work to do, but I think there's a mighty group here who represents the community that can help to really elevate those voices so that we can create actions that will then lead to sustainable change. We call it our legacy work, right? Because you all know that you're going to pass this to the next generation and the next generation. And so we really are excited and honored to be in this space with you. Thank you for allowing us to just join the community. We recognize the land we stand on. I even think about, as someone who's African American, who's had an opportunity to reflect on my own experience, my own ancestry, where we're still learning our journey, honoring that we just had a federal holiday that's been about 2 years in the works, right, called Juneteenth. And realizing like our descendants, right, our ancestors, and being a descendant. I even pulled out one of my old t-shirts, and it's old, you probably don't see the stains on there. But it reminded me today, as I come up here, I always appreciate you all reminding us to really honor the land we stand on and the people who came before us. We know we stand on the shoulders of people who are not here anymore, who don't see this legacy work happening. So I just want to honor that, and thank you for allowing us to join you in this space. And so before we get started, I want to make sure we do some introductions. We have a few logistical issues today that we want to honor. We have an amazing family of people who have joined us on Zoom who couldn't be with us in person, so we want to make sure that we include them in this conversation. And I'm going to do my very, very best not to forget them because sometimes that happens. We get so engaged in our in-person. But we have a facilitator, Dr. Shelley Jones-Holt. So Dr. Holt, if you want to unmute and just say hello to the group.
Hello, group that's in the room, and welcome to my Zoomies. I appreciate you. I do want to also honor Victor, who is our American Sign Language interpreter. If you've been watching him, he is doing his thing, so we appreciate you being here. And for my Zoomies that are here, if you are able to show your camera, we appreciate it to give us more of a sense of family here, and just appreciative of being in this space with everyone. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Holt. And so those that are on the Zoom, if you're okay, we want to do a quick introduction just of name and who you represent in the community. And I think we have a handful of folks who are not part of the staff who are actually part of the community. And so can we do a quick, just Dr. Holt, just do a quick whip around of name and who they're representing in the community?
Absolutely. Greta, would you mind getting us started? Hi, I'm Greta Side. I'm the Secretary of the Lake County NAACP. Thank you for being here, Miss Greta. Always a pleasure to see you. Ms. Dolores.
Hello, everyone. And Greta, I met you last Saturday at Juneteenth.
Yes, you did. And I met you. Thanks. It was good to see you. Ms. Dolores, you want to tell us which part of the community that you represent?
I'm not sure what that means. I'm a heterosexual Black woman who lives in Lake County. And I'm just here to find some things out for myself and be representative of the population that is here. And we would like just to join the conversation.
Awesome. And thank you, Ms. Dolores. Ms. Dolores is an amazing resident and has always been here. So I just want to, again, thank her. And for our Zoomies, she may be one of the folks facilitating in your space. Ms. Sally Peterson.
Amani, Hioni, Kalaktak. My name is Sally Peterson. I'm an enrolled member of the Middletown Rancheria. I also work for the Big Valley Rancheria as their housing director. I've been involved with this committee since the beginning and still am very excited to see this work happening in our county. I have been a resident in the county over 20 years, raised my two sons here in Middletown in Lake County. And they are African American and Native American. So they had some challenges growing up and experienced things that young, dark men should not have to experience. So I'm glad that we're having these difficult discussions about things like that. And I'm just happy to be here. So collect that.
Thank you, Sally. Ms. Maria.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Bowen. I am the chairman of NCO's governing board. I represent all of Lake County, especially those who are grossly underrepresented. I am excited to be here. I really want to be able to advocate for all those who aren't able to communicate, whether it's in English, Spanish, or whatever language. I just want to be able to advocate for all those and make sure that everybody in our community is being served and heard.
Thank you so much, Miss Maria. Miss Bethany, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Wonderful.
Good to see you. My name is Bethany Moss. I'm the chief building official for the city of Lakeport, and I've been a part of the group for a little over a year now, and so excited with all of the work and the momentum that it's come to be. And so I'm really looking forward to our third forum tonight and getting to know all of you better.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Miss Wilda.
Good evening. Wilda Schock, fifth generation resident of Lakeport and chair of the Lakeport Economic Development Advisory Committee and involved with other activities in the community. And this has been a very enlightening process, and I'm looking forward to tonight's conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you. Sarah Angulo.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Angulo. I work at UC Davis and I'm working on a project in Lake County that is gathering environmental education projects, resources, programs. So I'm here to listen to what everyone is saying and hopefully incorporate those ideas and thoughts into the project.
Thank you so much for being here. Janet Rosales. Janet, are you there? All right. I'm not sure if Janet is going to unmute or something may be happening. And we also have our Spanish translation. Si quieren traducir en español, por favor, déjame para que podamos poner acerca de Janet. Thank you. Oh, there you are.
I am here. I'm so sorry. I'm having issues with my camera.
No worries.
Okay, can you hear me?
There you are.
Hi, my name is Janet. I am new to the community. I just moved to Clearlake like a month and a half ago. I've been in Sonoma County for over 20 years. So I just want to be part of you guys. I want to be part of the community. I want to be engaged with everyone. I want to know what's going on in our community and my community now, and I want to be part of it and see what challenges, what things are, anything that's happening in that community that it's either a challenge or a benefit for everyone.
Thank you so much for being here. And Kate Schmidt-Hopper, I know you just jumped on. We're just doing a quick introduction of ourselves for us here on Zoom, and then there's also an in-person group. Would you mind unmuting and sharing your camera if you can, and tell us who you are and welcome?
My name is Kate Schmidt-Hopper. I'm basically a dedicated, dyed-in-the-wool Democrat who has been championing Democratic agenda since I was 17 years old. Starting with a walkout from high school during the Vietnam War, and now totally ticked off that so many of the things that we already accomplished have been undone by our current Supreme Court. So here I am, continuing to learn, continuing to keep myself juiced up so I can keep active in trying to make at least my small community a better place. So that's
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your presence. And Janet Perez, I'll let you go ahead and wasn't sure if you're coming on. Hey, how are you?
Hi, good afternoon. So my name is Janet Perez. I represent the Equal Legal Company. It's a company for interpretation and translation in Spanish speaking. So, mi nombre es Janet Pérez, represento a la compañía Ecolegal, por si alguien es para interpretaciones y traducciones en español. Si alguien en el foro necesita ayuda para traducciones en español, me pueden contactar.
Thank you so much. And I'll turn it back. I didn't miss anyone, did I? I don't want to think
I think we have we have our interpreters. I think we already acknowledged and everyone who's on the Zoom, and there may be some more who come on. So I know you all will be in breakout rooms and continue to get to know each other and your story. So thank you again for joining. And we're going to move into our in-person space to do quick introductions as well. I do want to honor that we are on Facebook Live as well and the YouTube channel. So there may be many who are just watching or listening. So we want to welcome you as well to this space, and hope that in the near future we'll hear your voices as well. At the very end, we'll have an opportunity to allow voices to share in our survey as well at the end, and we'll pause to make sure we can hear the voices of those that are in the virtual space. So we're going to do a quick whip around, keyword quick, and you're just sharing your name and who you represent in your community. Keyword quick. All right, here we go.
Lisa Kaplan, I represent the Middletown Arts Center. We have great representation from Middletown today. And I first came aware of this group at the Community Call for Action way back when, and created a partnership with Clavis, and that partnership became many other partnerships with underrepresented communities that were trying to and working to build bridges at the Middletown Arts Center.
Hello, my name is Lucia Mendez. I represent the community of Middletown. I am the MUSD translator, and I'm also just recently started working for the Middletown Arts Center with Lisa Kaplan.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Julie Evie McKenzie. I'm the regional manager for the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. It includes 4 counties, including Lake County. I'm also a resident of Lake County, so I have an interest in this on 2 levels, both on behalf of people with disabilities as well as just residents in our area.
I'm Tim Williams. I'm a Clearlake resident. I think I probably represent me, hopefully. And I'm interested in this process because I came here almost 20 years ago and felt that I was in a culturally a wasteland at first, until I discovered how deep the culture here is and how important it is that we honor and respect it, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you. They know you, huh?
Hello, I'm Dave Geck, and I'm a retired educator, live up on Cobb, and let's see, got interested a lot into what was going on after George Floyd, and looking for some, I think, strategies that would help us feel confident about transparency in terms of all parts of our process here in terms of law enforcement, but also governmental agencies and everything. So that's kind of where we got started, or I got started.
Hello, I'm Rose Gack, and I've been a member of Lake County, a citizen of Lake County here for over 40 years. Started in Citizens for Transparency, gathered a group of county residents, and then was invited to join this group. I call myself Latina, and I am here predominantly because I have grandsons that are biracial and are affected by the incidents that have happened, such as George Floyd. So I'm here to represent them as well as my Latina community.
Alan Fletcher. I live in Lucerne. Across the street is the ancient village of Shigom. My main activity in the county right now is working with a group called Citizens for Healing, who hopes to change the name of Kelseyville.
You sure you don't want to tell us who you are? But welcome.
Chintama, Winawa, Wimashi E.J. Crandall, District 3 Supervisor. And for the translators, I just basically said, hello, friends. My name's E.J. Crandall. So, yes, enjoy being a part of this process, sharing stories. We all deal with some way, shape, or form inequities. And so I think once we understand each other, we can get to a better place and put down our differences. I know it's lofty. A lot of people feel like it won't happen, but if we don't try, it'll never change.
Hello, everyone. My name is India Mendonça. I would like to say happy Juneteenth to everyone and happy Loving Day to everyone who's in an interracial marriage or in any interracial coupling. I represent my family, the Mendonça family. We're an interracial family. I have a biracial daughter. I represent the Lake County Literacy Coalition, as well as I represent the Honoring All Voices Community Visioning Forum. Thank you. And I represent African Americans in Lake County.
My name is Barbara Christwitz, and I guess I represent a group that picks up litter. And anyway, this morning I did that, and picking up litter is really a front for building community. And this morning, here I am faced with bags of garbage behind this building, and I couldn't lift it. And so who would come along but a new friend named Omar. And Omar helped me hoist those bags up and tie them down. And he said he'd be here. I'm going to call him and say, where are you? But anyway, I helped build community, and in an odd way.
Thank you again for being here.
Michael Green, I represent the 4th District for the County of Lake. I'm a county supervisor. Joined the board in late October. My predecessor, Tina Scott, has been very strong on issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and one hope I have had since assuming her seat is that I can carry on in some limited fashion with as much passion as she did. So,
great to officially meet you. Yeah, thank you for joining. All right, I think I got everyone, yes? And of course, we always want to acknowledge our tech team. Thank you both, Sam and Tim. Thank you so much for your hard work behind the scenes. And so we're going to jump right in and get this party started. I mentioned earlier about going a little deeper into the conversations. This is our 3rd forum. So we're going to have the same conversations, same questions, the prompts, but we want to just take the conversation deeper. And so before we do that, we do want to establish some working agreements. And so those of you that have been in this space before, you may recall our working agreements. I may even give you a little quiz. Yes.
Would you mind sharing your screen?
Yes, I'm doing that as we speak.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so what we're going to do is share a couple of just visuals before we get our conversation started. We want to give you as much time as possible to be able to have a deep dialogue today. And so as we come to the space of honoring the voices of our community, I want to make sure we understand kind of why we're here. And so, come on. Technology always shows up right on time. All right. So again, part of our purpose, what we're going to talk about. So I heard the word safe space, and I think it's important for us to recognize what safe space means. And when we talk about the space being safe for our community, we want to ensure that we recognize that everyone is not here for a particular reason. One, there may be a misunderstanding of the differences we have around what the word equity, diversity, respect, you know, all the buzzwords that are happening all over the world. There's a kind of a misunderstanding of what it means. We want to make sure we recognize that that safety is needed so that there's not a blame or shame experience, right? That we don't feel that we're in a space that people cannot engage because they have a different mindset, a different way, upbringing, a different perspective. And so what we want to do is think about how we're going to collect the voices. We call it qualitative data. And that qualitative data is actually around the experience of the community. You all have access to quantitative data, which is really a fancy word for those pretty charts you get to see. So I know the supervisors, you get lots of presentations from the staff, right? All of us in our workspaces, we look at the data. We know that we have health crises, right? We know that mental health plays a role. We know we have criminal justice work we have to do. We have so many ways in education that we see these inequities in systems. So we all know that. But what we want to do is go a little deeper, because as we take action, what we don't want to do is make assumptions that the things we're doing actually are working for our community. And so hearing the voice when we say, hey, we want to give this respect, we want to give equity, we have to really define what that means for those that we're serving. And so before we go into that space, the safety that's needed in here, really we want to talk about it being centered around what we call our 4 agreements. And those of you that were with us before, you may recall our 4 agreements as we get ready to engage in the work. This is our pop quiz time for those that have been with us together. But in our 4 agreements, we've had an opportunity to talk about stay engaged. So everyone say stay engaged. And what that means is really physically, mentally, emotionally, what does it mean to lean into the conversation even when it may feel slightly uncomfortable? And I think that's very important for us to recognize. How do we stay engaged? I heard the word differences. I heard many of you actually reflecting on how in this community, our stories have shown that those differences really have become problematic. We've seen some ugly behavior, right? We've seen it over and over. We've seen it around this nation, around this world, where differences come into a space. And we actually have a very divisive culture, right? We go our separate ways. It's either right or wrong, and there's no in between. And so often our work with Dr. Holt and I try to do is really help people see where we have to agree to stay engaged even when we have a space where we may be uncomfortable. And so often that's where we disengage, right? When that divisiveness happens, it's easier to go my way, you go your way, and we don't have that discussion anymore. And so with healing, the healing process requires us to lean in and actually move through the discomfort, to be okay with hearing a story that may not be your story. It may be different from my story, but we have to agree to have that conversation. So this structure today, and that we've done our last 2 times, is to give you a space where it's safe to talk about uncomfortable conversations. And so I want to make sure that that's really, really clear about stay engaged, very important, but I also want you to say experience discomfort. Experience discomfort. And many of you are like, I don't know about that. I do want to delineate. Sure. So I want you to delineate between safety and comfort. So when I say comfort, that's where I feel a space where we can talk about this. A little different from your story, but we can talk. Safety is where I may feel harmed, where I may lose my job, I may have retaliation, I may lose my life, I may be harmed. And many of us know that that can be something that is felt in a community. So we want to ensure that we have this conversation where we can lean in, that there is a level of discomfort, but not a lack of safety. Because discomfort just means we get to grow. Okay, the more we learn, the more we get to grow. And so ultimately, our 3rd agreement is speak our truth. Okay, so I want you to say, speak your truth. And so what that means is that we want you to tell your story, right? Supervisors, Sabatier. Sabatier. It's eh.
It always helps to just say what we're doing.
It's a beautiful French name, though. It reminds me of our Creole ancestry. But I appreciate you sharing your story, right, and speaking your truth. And it may cause discomfort for somebody, but it's your truth. And what that has done is help someone else learn. And so often we don't share our stories, right, because we may think it's not significant. We may think it doesn't matter. We may think that it may cause discomfort for someone else. And so we have to understand speaking truth in this space. We have to create the conditions for everyone to tell their story, even if it's not your story. And that's very important, because ultimately, how do we get to undo some of the harm? Is you got to know what's harmed. So we have to be able to speak those stories, and that's where the empathy comes in, and that's also where we make connections to people where we actually have more in common than not, right? That's where we find. And so we want to have those discussions. Ultimately, our final agreement is to expect and accept non-closure. So I want you to say that. Expect and accept non-closure. Non-closure. So this is where, for those of you that have the personalities where you have to get it done, you got to check that box off before the night is over. You want it wrapped up pretty in a bow. It's nice and clean. We want that project done. We want to check the box and move on. Unfortunately, this type of work actually has a lot of non-closure. It's messy. There's no definition of the right way to do it. And that's often why it becomes very difficult to engage in these conversations, because sometimes we are going to have what we call a cultural conflict, and it's messy. And so that's why we say stay engaged, even when it's messy and uncomfortable. Be okay with the discomfort, because as we push through it, that's where we come on the other side of really being stronger as a community. Speaking our truth is where we have to agree to put all those perspectives in this space. You see a picture of the elephant and the blind man poem, which is a parable. It was a poem adapted from a parable. And this is helping us understand that as we unpack this thing called community, right? Culture. We call it even being culturally proficient, where we recognize and respond to differences effectively. That elephant, as we come to it, we may all see it very different, just like in the poem. And those 6, what we call blind men in the poem, represents people who had different perspectives. And what you'll find is as they're unpacking that elephant, they're arguing and debating about what it is. And the reality is they're all right, but they're all wrong. And so that's where this work becomes very, very difficult. And so as we engage today, we want to just make sure we have a little context of what the definitions of these particular topics we're going to talk about today. And so as we move into what the work is about, you may notice these 2 images, which always are really, really helpful in us understanding where we're going with our conversation. And so you may notice on the screen, you'll see these 4 quadrants, and you see the words equality, you see equity, you see reality, and you even see belonging. And you may notice the work you're doing in your community is around taking that fence down, that barrier. And you have all these wonderful community members that represent your community, right? They're all different sizes, shapes, sizes, beautiful, amazing. I don't think there's any deficit to them. They're all brilliant. They're all gifted. They're just different sizes. And what that looks like in a community is that fence is up. And that fence is representing a barrier that has been very, very challenging for some to be able to see. And we call that the success in reaching our full potential as a human being, seeing the baseball game, maybe even owning the baseball team. Maybe I'm the pitcher. But you can imagine, as you're thinking about this work, it's very similar to allowing ourselves to see how we can serve our most vulnerable community so that they can see, not only see over that fence, but eventually we can knock that fence down. And so part of our conversation, I want you to ground in this. Many of you are struggling with how do we really get to this place? And I want you for a moment to take away, just for a moment, the concept of race and ethnicity. You know, all those labels we put on people? Gender, language, socioeconomic status. I can keep going down the list, right? We have all these ways that actually, the most common ways we discriminate against people. Great data on it, but if you just take those layers away for a moment, I want you to think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If there are any community members who don't have Maslow's, that's where we start. I don't know any human being that could really argue about a human just having basic needs. And sometimes the entry point to our conversations are going to be, do we have our basic food, shelter, clothing? Do people feel a sense of belonging and love, those relationships, right? Our brother, I think that friends you made, right? Like that connection. Human beings need that. By the way, a lot of these things are free. Sometimes it doesn't require $1. It just requires us to be mindful of spreading our resources we already have, right? Self-esteem. Do our community members feel like I can be successful when I live here? That's a mental model, right? Do I feel I can actually make it here? Do I have hope? Do I have self-esteem in my own abilities? Because that's where I get to self-actualization, which is where I reach my full potential. And that could be a variety of things for each individual. So it's super important that we always go back to Maslow's as we talk about this particular work. And so as we get ready to go into our conversations, we're going to give you about an hour and a half to actually go into our questions, but I want to give a little bit more context before we get started. All right, perfect. So as we're thinking about the conversation today, there's a couple of words we want to make sure we unpack. So respect, fairness, and inclusion. So that's what our topics are going to be about today, respect. So I want you just for a moment, think about when you hear the word respect, what comes to mind for you? Respect. If I go around the room, everyone may have a different definition. But what does respect mean? Just giving consideration, attention, admiration of people. Consideration. While taking that perspective into account. Respect. Honor. Fairness. Some people think that fair means equal. Give everybody the same thing. Right? Give everyone the same thing. But the reality is that that's not fair. Right? Remember the kids on the boxes, right? The younger kid, shorter kid needs more. Right? We give them all the same thing, they still can't see over the fence. So definition of fair does not mean equal, even though equal opportunity for equal benefit is central to its meaning. So what does that mean is equality in terms of outcomes. Can we all see over the fence? When we say fair, can we all see over the fence? That's the equal outcome. Inclusion. It's a tough one. Because we have had ways where we've definitely been honoring the diverse voices of our community. We've allocated resources in ways that are really honoring. But what we're missing a lot of times is the concept of inclusion, which is the act of creating an environment which each individual or even a group is welcomed. There's that word respect, supported, and key is valued versus tolerated. I add that in. Do you value me or you tolerate me? And that's something we have to wrestle with, right? Do I feel included or am I just allowed to exist here but not feel welcome? And that's what you're going to find from a lot of community members who may be very quiet, who may not be engaged because they may not feel like they're included. And so this is the work we're going to unpack together as we go into the space of processing our conversation and questions today. But before we jump in, I want to just pause for a moment and see if there's any comments or questions about the three words that we're really going to unpack today: respect, fairness, and inclusion. Anyone want to add to the context here in person? And also those that are on Zoom, if anyone wants to add any context before we get started with our questions. Respect, fairness, inclusion. Pretty clear, right? All right. No examples we need? Yeah, we're ready. Okay, Zoom family, anyone want to jump in and share? Just want to make sure we don't forget about our Zoom family. I want to make sure also if we have any of our Facebook Live comments, if we need to pause for a moment at all. Let's see if we want to honor our Facebook Live folks. Okay.
I think I'm the only one who's been commenting on Facebook Live.
All right. All right. So here's what we're going to do. At any point, just have me pause if we have any comments. We want to honor those on Facebook Live as well. All right, perfect. Perfect. All right. So what we're going to do, we're going to get started with our process today. And what I want to do is make sure that we can understand kind of what the context of the conversation is. And we have these 4 guiding questions. And these particular questions are going to be instrumental in our conversations. And what we're going to do is actually break you up based on this group. I think we'll do 3 groups today. And so we'll just kind of have some family conversation versus our table groups. But these are going to be our 4 questions. Okay, so I want us to just internalize those, and what we'll do is we're actually going to break you up and have a facilitator who will be available to keep the conversations going. And so the first question we're going to talk about today is, how do you define respect, fairness, and inclusion? How do you define it? And so we're going to ask that each of you come up with that discussion. What gets in the way of you and your family getting the needs met in Lake County? So this is where we talk about the fence, the barriers. What's getting in the way of you getting what you need? What history must be acknowledged to begin this community healing that I've heard several of you bring up? So what needs to happen? What history needs to be acknowledged for us to begin the healing process? And our last question is, what would support all of our Lake County residents, in particular feeling respected, included, and of course experiencing fair outcomes? So that's kind of our solution question, right? Like, what are those actions or things we need to do to ensure that our community members, our residents feel included, feel like there's fair outcomes, and feel respect? So the way this is going to work is we're going to go into 3 groups here. I believe on the Zoom, Dr. Holt will have the group in, looks like maybe 2 groups, if not 3, depending on what you need there on the Zoom. And what we're going to do is I'm going to give you about 12 minutes per question for you to discuss, and then we're going to pause and have you share out. So this is now going to shift from me having the microphone to you all having the microphone. The difference this time, just give me a wave if you've been here before, which is most of you, right? Most of you have attended either on Zoom or in person. The difference this time is I really want you to push yourself to go deeper. So what does that mean when I say deeper? I want you to think about the marginalized voices who are not in the room and what you are aware of in terms of their lived experience and, of course, even your own experience. So take it deeper. Talk a little bit more about the impact of race and racism. Talk about the impact of sex and sexism. And I can go down the list, right? Ableism, you can go all the way, ageism, there's all those isms, right? Based on the identity of who your community members are. So take the conversation a little deeper this time and call it out. For who are we referring to when we talk about respect? Does that make sense? Take a little bit deeper. Okay, so before we break into groups, I just want to see if our family on Zoom has questions before Dr. Holt takes them into the Zoom space. Any questions before we go into the Zoom space?
Sorry about that, my mic. Are we going to have an opportunity to go in and discuss in groups of each and every question, or do we just get to select one in particular?
Yes, again, so what Dr. Holt's going to do is pull you all into breakout rooms, and we're going to do the same here in person. We're going to go through all 4 questions, about 12 or so minutes apiece, and then we're going to share out in between each question. Okay, so we'll have to have someone who's going to be a reporter to share out. We also have chart paper here in the in-person space for you to write your group's responses. On Zoom, you all have a Google Doc that Dr. Holt has access to for you to record your responses so that we can collect this data. But ultimately, we're going to share out after each question. Okay? So Dr. Holt, is your team good to go? Not sure if Dr. Holt is on. There we
go. One moment, I'm setting them up now.
Okay, perfect. So we are not going to ignore the Zoom group, but we're going to go start getting into our groups, and then in between, we'll make sure that we acknowledge their share out. Okay? All right. So Zoom folks, I'm going to be putting my mic down, and you all are going to, I'm going to come back in about, at this point, once you get started, probably at about 7:15. So it's more like 14 minutes from now for our share out for our first question. All right.
All right. No problem. So Zoomies, I am going about to open the rooms. Our support folks, you are all in one room.
All right, so we're going to ignore them now. All right, so here's what I'd like to do. If you all want to stand first so we can stretch, you've been sitting for a little while. If you need to do a little stretching, a little yoga move, a little breathing.
Right, and the rest of
and
you,
what we're going to do is we're going to...
Dolores.
Okay, there we go. And so what I'd like to do is have us in, we're going to use the kind of three corners. So where Matthew is right here, I want to have a team, if we can hear a team of three. And then we're going to have a group here and then a group over here, if that's okay. So 1, 2, 3? Okay, perfect. All right. So I'm going to ask, let's see, you all are kind of like spread out really well based on representation. So why don't we kind of keep this team right here together? Is that okay? And you all be in this corner? All right, perfect. And then Matthew, I think you already volunteered a facilitator, I think. So we'll find one facilitator for each group. And so let's see. I think I'm going to break you two up because you all have been together way too long. Yeah, I think I'm going to break you up. So how about this? Let's have one of you come to this side, if that's okay. It's like, see you, David. And let's see. So Alan, Rose, and I think, Tim, how about you join us here? That's perfect. So, all right. So we got 3 here. And then let's see. Why don't we, so Lisa, I think you were a facilitator last time, huh? You mind doing that again for this group? Okay. So why don't we come and we'll be in this corner. So it'll be you 4. That's okay. And then I think you were just kind of rotating around, which is fine. But you can pick a group if you want to stay with them. It's perfect. And I think Joanne and Matthew, you kind of bounced around as well, right? Want to make sure we kind of balance out the voices. Who did I lose here? Oh. Okay, all right. So how about you join here as well? Okay, that way we can, since this is your first one in person. Perfect, all right. I don't need this mic, do I? Not anymore. No. Do I need this? Well, for technical, okay. When you go back together. We can shut it off for now. All right. So here's where we're going to go. So we're going to start. We can shut it off for now, or should I? Is what you have on the timer for the very first question. Okay. So we're going to need someone to be a reporter. We can write chance of shutting it off.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
If you need more than one sheet, that's fine. But we want the discussion to be the main focus. Okay, not just the writing. So I want you to discuss first. But we want to have a recorder, and then of course someone who's going to report out. And your report is going to be pretty quick, like the 1-minute drill, maybe 2 minutes at the most. So we can get to your second, third, and fourth question. Okay, and the goal is go deeper. Okay, really going deeper into the conversation this time around.
And we're going to score you on your handwriting.
Yeah, because we really do need that for later. So yes, legible report. All right, so we ready? All right, starting now. 12 minutes.
We know it is technically, but it's more. It's availability or opportunity to share because there are be it language, be it language, be it written. I love that. I don't think we have a sound check.
I do. I actually go as a consultative in my district. Yeah, we're still trying to work on getting. I like how they put the rocks up there so people can jump, but we're trying to get more cameras.
It's like if we got ASL.
We have a camera. We have an LDR camera, but it's not. But you were asking about community service in he's here, the superintendent. Yeah, he's the superintendent for all schools.
Yeah, so close to California. I think that's like.
So giving you the 2-minute warning. 2-minute warning. Yeah, just question one. Just question one. 2-minute warning. Just question one. Have a report over here. Reporter to share out 2 minutes. Just question one.
Yeah, so all of these accommodations are acceptable to people, right? That help.
So about 30 seconds. I'm going to ask the reporter to be ready to report out. 30 seconds. All right, 30 seconds, and then we're going to have our groups report out. All right, so we have our team here. Supervisor Green, yeah, we got someone who's going to report out. Did you volunteer? All right, we got our reporter here. Yes, we have one ready here, one here. Just want to make sure. All right, we have a reporter here. Perfect. All right, our Zoom space, Dr. Holt, just give me a wave if you all are ready to report out as well. Just give a wave if you can hear me okay. All right, so we're going to start with our in-person folks, then we'll go to our Zoom, and then you all are start next. And so this is a very, very quick share out, then we're moving to our next question. Okay, very quick share out. So I'm going to start by handing the microphone to our very first group, and you have exactly 1 minute to share out how you define respect, fairness, and inclusion.
Okay, here we go. So respect, we said it's important to be listened to and listened by. And basically, and then treat others how you'd like to be treated yourself. And then also invited to the event. So we know inclusion includes invited to the event, but the respect part is saying you're invited to the event. The inclusion part is you're asked to dance at the event. So not only are you invited, but we want you to participate. And then the deeper dive that we took, we came back to this idea of a willingness to pass the torch. For those of us that have been working in community for long periods of time, the willingness to pass it along. And then we also need the willingness to accept the torch by the next generation. And then for fairness, we thought about understanding others' needs and wants, but we knew it was important to do it from their perspective, because we spend a lot of time saying, well, you should feel this and you should feel that and you should be blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, no, no. When they tell you their experience, we need to be respectful about it and we need to believe them. And then we let their experience inform our next response, whatever that's going to be. And then in the inclusion, more than just understanding it, actually embracing that perspective to inform our response. Yeah, and then also accepting the desired level of participation. Maybe some people got invited to the dance, but they don't want to dance. And accepting that. So
powerful. All right. All right, next group sharing out. We'll go again, 1 minute.
A lot of the same themes.
Okay,
If I were
so 1 minute. We spent about, please, I will respect your
dueling
microphone.
microphones.
I'm sorry.
No worries. So really, we didn't parse them out into 3 different categories, really, but what it all boiled down to at its root is creating space for everybody's voice to be heard. And the deeper dive with that was acknowledging that there are a lot of ways that people communicate and need support to communicate. Now I'll take credit for this. I mean, this is a lot of what I do is my work is with people with disabilities. They got a lot of different ways of communicating, but that's also true of non-native English, people who do not speak English well or at all, people who are extraordinarily shy. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool introvert, and most people don't recognize that about me because I've learned how to put myself out there, but I need encouragement to participate in things. So it's really listening to what people need in order for their voices to be heard and then putting those things into place. When we did this thing, I pretty much insisted that we have ASL here, and the committee was like all over it, like, yes, but it's so often tied to what we don't know. So we've got to put those things out there to say, what are we missing so that you can participate?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for calling out some of the groups who are marginalized and are not heard, right? So really appreciate you going deeper and making those connections. So the other mic, Supervisor Green.
Oh my gosh. Okay. First, we argued for about 10 seconds over what our acronyms were. Are we talking about fairness here? Inclusion? What is this? So we had to redo that. And that's part of tonight. That's part of been my journey is what are you guys talking about? So True Confessions, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Mr. Matthew Rothstein introduced me that. I had no clue. So we're working on all that stuff. Our take was for, which one? Respect. Respect. If something's coming up in your world, imagine it was your problem, and then what would you want, but then what would others want? What would you want for yourself if you faced a problem? What would you want for those guys and gals? And in an ideal world, that'd be the same thing. In the real world, maybe not so much. Fairness, our fairness take, fair outcomes, right? Fairness, we can talk about it in theory. In practice, we have to talk about fair outcomes. Mr. Matthew gave us the phrase diverse needs appropriately met. So then I went off, well, what's appropriate? Come on, define that term. But you know, at least that's the gauge we use. First we identify needs, how do we meet the needs? He was actually totally on that. Inclusion, we talked about inclusion. We used an example here. And so inclusion does not include isolation. It does not include fear. It does not include all those things that might be going back to Maslow, an impediment to those basic needs. But inclusion can be focused on progress, can be focused on accomplishment. If you have a sense of accomplishment, then all of a sudden you have a sense of inclusion and belonging. Does that sound like what we said?
Well said.
Just shake your head. Yeah,
well
okay.
said. Powerful. I appreciate that reflection. Yep. And then we got our Zoom folks.
I just want to add something because you kind of mentioned something from the perspective of leadership earlier in the conversation. And I think that respect and inclusion and fairness is to look at current representation, and we talked about passing the baton and making sure that when you pass the baton, you're expanding the diversity of that leadership and not just continuing the exact same imagery of that leadership representation. As leaders, we have that capability to tap people on the shoulder and bring them, and that is inclusion. That's fairness because we're helping to create the platform that has not been accessible, and that's respect, saying you belong there.
That's right. Yeah, I love it. I appreciate that. As you were speaking that, I was feeling like valued, right? Like that feeling of being valued. They respect me, right? And I even love your conversation about making sure you can think about what it means to be in somebody else's shoes, right? Like really putting ourselves in that space. That's a very interesting way to approach this work, right? What does that mean for yourself, but what about others, right? Thank you for that. So Zoom space, if we can quickly have our 2 breakout rooms, 1 reporter from each room, just quickly share your overall summary of respect, inclusion, and fairness.
All right, thank you, Sally. Go ahead and get us started, and then we'll go to Sarah.
Okay, we were in room 2, and we started out talking about respect. We feel like it includes acceptance of a person's point of view, respecting a person's abilities and qualities of others and their traditions, honoring their traditions and culture, and understanding, love and honor regardless of past, and consider needs of others. And as we started talking about the different definitions of respect, fairness, and inclusion, we kind of started feeling like you can't really have one without the other, that you can't have fairness without inclusion, that each depends on each other. We went on to say building the same mutual respect among the community members, openly honoring and understanding each person for who they are, to be welcoming. And that was pretty much it.
Excellent.
Thank you so much. All right, Sarah, take it away. Round us out.
Okay, so we defined respect as, just treating others the way you want to be treated, or treat people the way they want to be treated. And it really involves feeling comfortable and interested in learning about other cultures and starting from like a base of cultural competency. and just like being aware of, where other people are coming from. And then fairness, we talked about having a shared understanding of what the rules are, how people are considering themselves, and how you're placing yourself within that, and just like constantly being open to feedback and dialogue. And then inclusion is, again, being observant of where people are coming from, and welcoming people not just because of the ways we're all the same, but celebrating the ways that people are different and giving those differences an equal platform to share.
Absolutely. Well said. Thank you so much. Powerful. Hand claps for you all in the Zoom space. Thank you for that. Before we go to our second question, I want to just honor you all pushing yourselves to think a little deeply about what these terms mean. Because again, if we were in a space where, as you all raised your hand, most of you have been in this space before. But if we took this space and actually, I don't know, went around the corner, down the street, and spoke to a community and asked them about how they feel about these three, might they share the same thing that we're sharing in this room? And I would like to say yes, but maybe in the way that they see it. And so as you're thinking about this, I push you all because I feel the sense of leadership in this room, right? We all have some position of power or influence, right? And so how do we really think about what it means when someone says respect, fairness, inclusion, and I feel that? Does every single one of our community members have that experience? And these are the voices we're still going to have to collect, right? Because they may say these are great and we got a lot of hand claps. But then how does that feel in the community? Are people feeling that? And this is going to be important to really unpack before we go to question 2. Yes.
I just want to say, we can go to some other community and ask these same questions and get the same answers. But what do those answers look like? What part of the elephant are they looking at? And I think it's important to look at it that way.
Yeah, because we're going to get a lot of different experiences, right? You remember all those labels we talked about? Like I said, I'm African American, right? Like I call that a label to some degree in the data. And the African American community may have different ways of seeing what respect is. Because there's also intersectionality, right? Like I identify as a female. I identify as an English speaker, right? I identify as someone who's Christian. I identify in all these ways that it may be different from the person right next to me, who could be my brother, biological brother, right? In the same house. So we can't assume that that's going to be the same. And I think that's the part about being open to what people say respect is for them. And so that's where we're going with this work. Okay, so as we get to question 2, you got one more comment? All right.
I just wanted to say I noticed that doing community service with people, signing off hours for them, a lot of them are felons, and they don't feel that they belong in the community, and that they're kind of ashamed to be on the main street. And I tell them, no, it's good to be out here and let the public, especially the police, they're afraid of the police, see you're doing something good for the community, and you turned a stone, and it makes them proud that they're making a difference in the community, and that type, those people need more than ever to be recognized and heard.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great example. Again, going deeper, right? Calling out the community members who this applies to, right? And even those that may have been convicted of a felon, right? We already know about what we call school to prison pipeline. We know about mass incarceration, right? We know there's a system at play historically. But what happens when I've served my time? Do I get a second chance? And there's a lot of red tape around that not happening. So again, do you respect me when I put in my time, right? And do I feel included? And so there's a community forum in itself of just a community who's been feeling marginalized, may have made mistakes, but needs that second chance. And what we often find is that second chance is needed because the first mistake may have to do with impacts of certain community experiences in themselves. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to our next set of questions. So we're going to go for, again, 12 minutes. Our next question is, what gets in the way of you and your family getting your needs met in Lake County? And this is about that barrier. Remember the fence in the baseball game and the kids trying to see over the fence? What does that fence represent? What are those barriers? And I really want you all to go deep into this around how you're going to call out what is getting in the way of you and your family getting your needs met. Okay, what are those barriers? Okay, so we're going to go 12 minutes, discussion first, then we'll have, of course, our reporters and recorders, I should say our recorders to share out, our record, and then our reporters to share out, okay? All right, so our breakout rooms, I see you all going back to your rooms. 12 minutes. Again, what gets in the way of you and your family getting what you need? 1 minute. You ready? Y'all actually ready? Okay. So about 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. You all are ready.
Spend so much
that answer these same questions with like these common examples of their experience. Because there's a thirst to want to continue. So you can have them go first about that. Actually, I have my people first, huh? All right, my friends. So we're going to go ahead and get ready to share out. Get ready to share out. I believe our Zoom family is all ready to go first. So I'm going to pick on them first. So our Zoom family, we're going to have you jump in again. If we can do a very quick share out, I'm going to ask you just to whip through in more like a 30-second share out, if that's okay. So our group and in person, we're going to wrap up our conversations and get ready. So Dr. Holt, if you'll have our first breakout room, just about a quick 30-second response. I know we have your responses in writing too, but what are some of those barriers and things that get in the way of our families getting what they need in Lake County? So real quick.
All right, room one, get us started.
All right, so it was Dolores, Wilda, and myself. This is Bethany. One of the first topics that was mentioned was in regards to economics and inflation and rising prices, with income generally lower in comparison to other counties in California. Our next was just open conversation about each other's stories. Like we don't know each other's even, economic background or cultural experiences or anything like that without the conversation. And so that was important. And then just educating ourselves better. So I think those things our group felt do get in the way of our needs being met. We briefly discussed crime. So that also puts fear in people to, go out to events, especially when we see, mass shootings all over the news and things like that. And so our social needs are often hindered because of fear for different crime that's been going on, not just in our county, but, worldwide. And then, the lack of diversity, I think, in Lake County is not something that necessarily gets in the way of our needs, but it can, and it does for some people. And so just being able to have the open conversation to understand that, and then to recognize it and make changes moving forward. And so I think it just goes back to having these open conversations and forums just like this to be able to express our truth and our story.
All right.
All right, thank you. Room two, 30 seconds. Let's go.
Okay, so we talked a lot about access to services, geographic barriers. Communication is a barrier. There's a huge need for high-speed internet and adequate Wi-Fi. There's a lot of language barriers that we talked about. There was one example given that a senior who could not speak very good English was actually disconnected from an emergency call and was not able to get the help that they needed. Resources, basic needs for food, clothing, food instability is a problem. Some people can't afford to get vehicle registration or car insurance, or their license is suspended. They get in trouble because of those barriers. We need more economic development and opportunities in our area. We need affordable housing without discrimination. A lot of the language barrier also causes adequate education for those folks that have the barrier with the language. Also, we talked about leadership. Does leadership provide the adequate role models needed to address these issues? For instance, does leadership go after grants that are needed? Are they there? Do they live and breathe the issues, or are they not connected to their constituency? There was this talk about there is a disconnection between residents and leadership, and a lot of the longtime residents that have this good old boy attitude is still relevant in the community, and a lot of people experience that. And does that really reach leadership?
I think this group could benefit from hearing that. Is that okay? All right, come on up. All right, excellent. All right. So I'm going to have a special guest start us off with a quick response because I think it's important to have the voices of young people in the room. I know Gilbert and I were kind of speaking in our own space about some of the barriers in education and ways that our young people experience early in our school system. And so I wanted to just ask if you can just give us like a quick kind of understanding about what are some of the things that get in the way of you getting what you need at school.
A lot of kids just bully me because of my hair. And on the street, people just randomly yell at me like, "Is that 11 and stuff?" for no reason.
So the bullying. So I want you to hear that, right? And just being me, huh? That's what I call it. I'm just me, right? Leo, you just you, right? But some people tease and call you names, and we call that bullying. We call that bullying in schools, but just being different. And I want to ask a follow-up question because I think this is important as well. Do you have adults at school that understand how to stop that for you?
No, I try to tell the teachers, but they don't really do anything.
I want you to let that sit for a moment because this is a young person, right? It's my friend Leo. But Leo's going to be an adult in our community soon, before we know it, right? And we have adults who can echo the exact same thing, right? Is that I get this experience, I get this bullying, I get this horrible experience in my community, my neighborhood. My neighbors are mean, right? They're disrespectful. They don't include me. And there's nobody to call to help. Yes.
I go to Lucerne Elementary. Lucerne Elementary.
Thank you, Leo. We appreciate you. Now, we know you were doing some important things back there, so thank you for letting us interrupt. But I just want to make sure we lift up the voice of our young people. Super important we hear the voices, and just thank you for allowing us to hear that, okay? All right, my friend. They're waiting for you to teach them. Back there teaching them how to live life, right? We can learn from these young people. All right, you all were first. So real quick, if we can, as best we can, about a 30-second elevator speech to whip around so we can get to our next question.
Bullet points. We're all about, we did good this time. Barriers to meeting needs. Complacency. We can't have complacency, certainly not about bullying. Risk-reward calculations. If I reach out to help somebody, how's it going to go for me? How's it going to go for that person if I fail in helping that person? Risk-reward calculations. Social change, rapid social change. We're all facing that. How do we cope with that? Are we good agents of change, or are we hiding from it, like me most days? poverty is very widespread in this community. That's not news to anybody here. That is one of the biggest roadblocks. A sense of helplessness. Sometimes we would be willing to help, but maybe we just don't think we have the tools or the ability or the courage to do that. Conflict avoidance, confusion, certainly in terms of government services. What's out there? I don't even know all these programs were out there. Matching up the need with the program is a big thing of what we do at the county. Loneliness, that can be voluntary, self-imposed isolation, involuntary if you find yourself in homeless or something like that, or just in a bad living situation. Lack of trust, definitely a big thing in our county. Lack of shared experience, so if I did want to reach out to somebody and help, would I absolutely know how to do that? Maybe not. And then lack of dollars, government dollars, lack of facilities. Even if we wanted to step up as a county and just paper this county with money and services, do we have the practical ability to do that? And the answer is not necessarily, but we're working on it.
Okay, quickly, our group, things that get in the way of, you know, what are the barriers get in the way? Language, you know, second languages for a lot of folks. Also lack of awareness of, you know, what can you do to overcome the barriers? We've been talking already about socioeconomic issues, the poverty, lack of resources, lack of access to resources that to be able to take care of basic needs, system savvy skills, knowing what you have to do to take care of yourself. We talked about lack of opportunities in the systems, you know, mental health, you know, regular, you know, going to see the doctor. You know, we shared a story about being in the doctor's office. The doctor's office had a sign that says, if you don't have your Medicare card, if you don't have your secondary insurance card, and you have to be prepared to pay the copay on the spot. You know, and they have the little machine there to take your card or cash. Those people walked away. So, you know, intergenerational and personal experiences and the stigma that comes around some of that, you know. Let's see, being an advocate for yourself, how to, you know, learning or being aware of how to be an advocate for yourself and how is that appropriate. We talked a little bit about, you know, being assertive and to take care of yourself isn't necessarily something that's okay in your culture. You're used to having the system take care of, you know, whether if you're I'm in education, and so, you know, we talked a little bit about those parents saying, hey, I brought my child to you. You're supposed to be taking care of them. So, anything else, folks? No?
Tendency to be blamed.
Oh, and it's your fault. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, powerful. Thank you so much for that.
I can really feel the deeper dive with this group than what we've been doing before. It's wonderful. So what we came up with are first, how a community member is seen, meaning that a lot of folks judge a person by their cover, and that can be a barrier for getting needs met because we put them into categories of, you know, acceptable and yes, we should help them, or no, we shouldn't for different reasons. So the assumptions around that. And then we also talked about the age gaps, how the age gap can be a barrier for both young and old people for getting their needs met. And so, you know, we talked about how time changes things, and so things that were relevant for our generation, our younger folks can't understand, and things in their generation we can't understand, and that creates a big barrier for getting needs met for both the elders and the younger generation. Our own self-image can create a barrier for getting our needs met. How we, you know, our own inner self-esteem around that. Also, you know, how will I be received if I am being who I truly am, right? So that fear of how will I be received. The reputation of service providers and institutions, meaning what the face of the reputation of the services. If the reputation is poor, I may not go to get those services. but also the face of those services. And so if that face is not reflective of who I am, I may not feel safe enough to go to get those services. So being able to see who we are in our institutions here locally. Law enforcement, we talked a little bit about that, the whole idea of, you know, having a situation with power over. If our law enforcement folks were at the table of all these community conversations where they were just one sector of the community and we're all trying to find the answers together, then there would be less othering and distancing. And so when the time comes that we need that service, we would feel safer to be able to do that. Yeah, there's that part. And then going back to our first, you know, questions, not feeling respected and included in our community. You spoke about that. Folks that have served time, their ability to be able to come back and be reintegrated into society as respectful, as respected community members and participating, that's lacking. And what we recognized is that these are not necessarily Lake County specific, right? So these are, you know, Lake County and other communities experience these. Oh, is that a question? It's about
It's a comment. I really like the reputation of service providers and law enforcement here. I think it fits perfectly with the lack of trust, where even as providers, no matter what service we're providing, we need to recognize that we come with the face of the past. We carry what's happened in the past with us, and we have to not be angry about that. I've been there where I've had to adjust and not be angry about how others see me, but recognize that we carry the image and we have the possibility to change that image and help change things. And I want to add one thing. Somebody said language, and I don't know, I'm going to look at Gilbert. I don't know what his experience has been, but going to the INS building, which was the old ICE, the Immigration National Services or whatever, Naturalization Services, was probably my life's worst experience I've ever experienced. I said experience twice. The treatment, I have literally heard, come back when you speak English. So we have this conversation about legal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, but these are people with documents who went through the hoops and still were in front of me. My wife did not believe me until she came with me to the INS building, treated absolutely like subpar people. And language matters more than, even accents. You were saying that you were from New Orleans. Accents. People will not respect somebody because you sound like you're from the South. You must be this and that. And so the way we hear each other matters a whole lot. And I don't know what your experience has been with that, but I know that for me, that's been a big part of my adjusting and assimilation as an immigrant in this country is get rid of the accent, because that accent does a lot to make people look at you different.
Wow.
Appointed during Schwarzenegger's administration, right? And almost done here. And I do have an accent, I think, right? I don't hear myself that way, but I've been told. Poquito? Muy bien. Tú también. And I mean, within a week, I had the director of my department start with the homie jokes. We went on a trip to LA. Are you gonna visit your cousins? That type of stuff, right? Low riders. But I didn't get angry. That's one important thing. I understood. Sometimes people came from a place that they didn't understand. And she truly didn't understand. This person was from Philadelphia, you know, probably I was 21 at the time, so, or 22, yeah. She might have been 22 back in early 60s, right? So it was a different time. Those jokes, I guess, were okay to some people back then. But that's what an accent does, like you say, you know? I see it sometimes at airports, especially with our friends and community that speak Asian languages. The frustration, you know, behind the counter of, I don't understand this person, you know, and then they try, right, to get somebody or something. So yeah, no, you make a good point. Sometimes language it can be a barrier. And back then, my father was one who told me the stories like, go back and learn English, and those people actually did, but or tried sometimes, yeah. But that's really true.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah. All right, let's make it real quick because you all got 25 minutes left and you still have 2 questions, so we're gonna make it work.
I just have a statement, kind of goes along with the English. Some people know English, but yet they talk slang, kind of street talk, which I don't understand. My kids do that sometimes. Like, oh, that car's sick. And to me, it's like, that car is not sick. But, but a lot of things I don't get what they're saying because I'm not street smart. But they may know English, but the way they talk coming from jail and the streets, they have a whole different way that they talk. But, for them to be heard out in the public, the people look at them different. I don't understand what they're saying usually, but my kids tell me what they're saying.
Yeah.
But, that's a whole nother gap of communication with people.
Absolutely. Y'all are on this language one, huh?
And on that, because I know in some cultures there's a reason why they don't speak proper English, because there's an apathetic feeling towards the English assimilation that they have pain from their history from. And so I think what happens is in the cultures in the school, other kids are attracted to that type of dialogue, so they emulate it, which upsets cultures that aren't used to that. I know, for example, the Jamaicans, they speak English, but it's the way they want to speak English. It's not an actual it's made up language. It's them using the words with their enunciations and dialogues. And so people would call it inappropriate English, but to me it's Jamaican because they chose to make it their own. So that's another spin side to it. Just wanted to bring
Absolutely.
Yeah, could we sum that up by saying that a barrier is insisting on assimilation in this culture?
And I want to connect the dots for the definition from your first question. I heard respect, and I just want to unpack that because I think that is the gist of all of this is what do we define as respect? Do we respect in what I call value languages that are different from the dominant culture, or do we tolerate it? And I think that is where we see these behaviors that look very different. Now, the reasons for them, right, assimilation is one, there's value in people's own, I mean, there's a lot of reasons I think that we have to wrestle with this, but language, again, intersects with other identities. So I think it's gonna be important that you all recognize respect around language, value in this community. You're gonna have to really define that. And all of you that are bringing up experiences where people are coming to the counter, going to the hospital, right, and not being able to be served, the reality is that there are people who are working in those spaces who have not had an opportunity to hear that story, who have not been taught about even the differences. They just don't know any better. It's just how we do things here. And so this is going to probably spark with our 4th question about some of the action steps we're going to have to take to make sure people are even aware of this conversation that we rarely have. And what this is happening right here, imagine in a workspace. Instead of just the same old meeting, logistics, operations, right? That we actually have a dialogue about this, right? That's the deeper work, but we have to value that conversation and be okay with the discomfort that's gonna come with hearing these different versions of stories. All right, now, we got 20 minutes now. I got you on a roll, huh? Fired up.
The conversation on how we speak is because I'm thinking of people using the F word, and how that I can be pushed aside, and very judgmental. But if I can get beyond that, people have something to say. If I can get, but that's one of my barriers is my age and my upbringing that you never use the F word. Yeah. Well, the fact is there are a lot of people that every other word is the F word, but it's up to me to still listen underneath that.
That's deep. That's powerful. And that speaks to our barriers, right? What are our own barriers, right? That we can't get past how someone else speaks because it doesn't speak the way I speak. That's huge. That's huge. So here's what I think we want to do. And Zoom folks, I know you all are probably like, we want to talk, we want to talk. So you're going to go back to your breakout rooms right now, and we're going to just do our last 2 questions together. Okay, and I think they actually go synonymously with each other. So this third question is about the history, right? Like what history needs to be acknowledged so that we can really heal. Because a lot of the barriers have history to them. Every single one of you shared great insight on barriers, but they all have a history. Like they didn't just start today, right? How do we get here and what needs to be acknowledged so that we can create healing? And that's the third question. And your fourth question is really getting into the space of like, what are those ways that we're going to create those outcomes so that your citizens here in Lake County feel respected, that they feel like they actually are included and they have fair outcomes. So I want you to do question 3 and 4 together, okay? And what we'll do is come back together at about 8:25. So it gives you about 15 minutes, okay, to actually speak about both of those. So what history needs to be acknowledged and what are those ways in which we can ensure that that support, like what does that look like for your citizens to feel respected, to feel included, and to feel like they have fair outcomes. And again, I want to push you, go deep.
To feel respected or be respected? 2 different things.
I feel like they're synonymous because it depends on who you're speaking to. So you could feel like you're respecting me. So it's going to come from your lens, but if I don't feel that way. So there really is kind of synonymous. Do I feel it? And am I actually being respected? I think go hand in hand. So this is really something that you'd have to think about. What would that look like for our community? Because some of it we may or may not know until we hear their voice. It's a great question, though. Yep. All right, so let's jump into it, and let me make sure our Zoom people, they're already in it, hitting the ground running. Deep. Y'all are going deep. Keep it going deeper. Keep it going deep. Facilitators, you got it. All right, my friends, we have about 1 minute, and I'm going to pull you together. So 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute. So if I let them go, they would go till 9 o'clock, and they would. I kid you not. But we're not staying till 9. I want you all packed up and ready to go by then. All right. 1 minute. 1 minute. Reporters, we're going to do it a little differently, but we'll be ready to report out in 1 moment. 1 minute. All right, so about 30 seconds. I see our Zoom family coming back, so I'll be starting with you all first. 30 seconds. Great conversations. All
Room
right.
1, be ready to go first, and then we'll have room 2 round us out.
All right, so we're going to get our last groups together. I know you all got great conversation going. We're going to keep this going, and I think what we'll do for the sake of time is instead of going group to group, I'm going to actually have a whole group share out. So what that means is I just want to have a few final comments about this particular question, and then we'll close out with actual final thoughts about next steps, since this is our last forum. If I didn't stop you all, you'd go till about 9 o'clock, which means your conversations are great. That means these have to be continued. All right, so with that being said, our Zoom family, I just want to have just any closing comments to wrap up and summarize your conversation. So we can do that in about 1 minute. Just have any comments you want to be shared, just very quick to add to our last final share out.
For group 1, we had a really great conversation. Our takeaway was to really create an environment that we can have these deep conversations. And I think tonight we did a great job of getting deeper than we have in the past with our previous forums, but continuing to dive in further. And that even can be a small group setting where it's people that just really want to get to know one another, their past, acknowledge each other's experiences, their culture, their individual stories, and just appreciate, what we went through, and then, of course, to listen. And so we think too, the proclamations are great because a lot of people are, wondering what certain proclamations are for, and hopefully educating themselves, but really growing the small group conversations for those that, really want to listen. And then, using other resources such as the libraries and the museums to kind of assist with distribution of information that, maybe isn't being taught in the schools at this time, or maybe, due to COVID, certain subjects have been, kind of canceled out for the time being. And so just to surround ourselves with people who do want to know more and then support each other.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Bethany. Powerful, powerful. And I hear what's resonating with that group is connections and partnerships, right? Like we got to come together to do this work. We can't do it in isolation. And I know you all represented on the Zoom screen come from a lot of different agencies and parts of the community. So we look forward to the responses you all had on your Google Doc, which is going to be really powerful. So just thank you for that engagement. For the sake of time, I'm just going to open it up for the group in person here, if that's all right. And I also want to honor that we have a couple of comments from our Facebook Live that I just want to make sure we can honor and acknowledge. So anyone, whole group, just want to share out just any final comments, Lisa.
So we talked about acknowledging our differences in the history of place, stopping a cycle of abuse, leading by example, and that means both allies. Mostly it means to be an ally, to be an ally. Education, the importance of education, so important, and acknowledging our collective gifts as well as cultural and collective pain. Culture and collective gifts, and also culture and collective pain. And acknowledging and appreciating what diverse cultures bring to the table, and people speaking out when they see wrongdoing, which goes back to being an ally.
Thank you for that. Anyone want to add to the conversation before we close out? Final thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to note that we had a couple things about the education, Lisa, that you're talking about. but also that we don't need to know all the details of someone else's lived experience before we can treat them respectfully and with kindness. That as we go through this process, we need to start the respect and kind behaviors and learn more. Anything else, you guys? What was anything else?
I think the last thing I wanted to get to, what would support Lake County residents feeling respected included. And I would say we need to do an outreach to all these different communities and ask them what their barriers are, and then have a process of addressing those by our institutions.
Yep. All right.
I'd like to add something. Our group came up with the need for truth and reconciliation committees to come to Lake County, so that those who are in power have to address those of us who are part of and represent the minority communities.
Well said. Got a lot of claps in here, so thank you for reminding us of the structures that have been put in place, right? And how we can leverage what we're already doing. You're doing great work. It's just how do we elevate it and really utilize that to really elevate more voices who aren't still plugged in, right, to these great efforts. I think I saw 1 and 2, and then we're going to close out.
So I've been waiting for the right moment to have an argument with you, Nicole.
Oh, Lord.
In your presentation, you added belonging, and something bothered me about that picture. Yeah. Everyone looked the same. And I'm thinking we're here to figure out how we can all belong while still being us. And I think that's the complex problem that we're trying to deal with and overcome, but I couldn't help but be bothered by that picture. I understood the meaning, but the imagery kind of hurt me, where I'm like, I feel like I'm back in France where everyone's wearing a button-up shirt and a belt around their pants and they all look the same without a beard. I show up and they're like, you're no longer a French person. And so I think that picture doesn't embrace diversity in the way that I think we're all talking about it. And I hope you can go in your paint program and just add a little bit more color. They all look great, but belonging is important, but being yourself is also just as important.
No, I really appreciate your response, and I'm laughing because, of course, it's a cartoon that I didn't create. But to your point, I appreciate you seeing that, like, there's these differences we have to recognize, because feeling a sense of belonging, we got to unpack even when people, I think your group talked about stereotypes. I think I heard that here. And so remember, that exists, and that picture actually depicts, right? Like maybe there's a stereotype, and we got to unpack beyond just what we see, because that's where the assumptions come, and then we try to make decisions based on what we assume versus know the truth. And so I totally agree with you, and I'll work on the paint shop, but actually it was an online image. Those images actually, by the way, you can utilize those to create dialogue like this, because remember, I could see one thing, another person can see it, and that's how hard this work is. So definitely using imagery to help create these dialogues instead of feeling like you have to lead it is actually a powerful way to get those perspectives put in the space. So one final comment, and then I'm going to read the Facebook Live comments, and then we're going to wrap up and get you all out of here.
I'm just wondering if in schools, if they could incorporate taking the younger generation and letting them learn, which everyone in this room probably has done, milked a cow and got butter, and the way food used to be made, and maybe it might humble some children to learn how it really is, instead of going to the supermarket and wearing the name brand shoes and pants, and you're cool because you got these pants on, but really we all bleed red. We all need food, love, and warmth.
Yep.
And it might humble kids to go milk a cow and make their own butter and see how things really are.
It's powerful. Yeah, I love how you called out the education system to close this out, huh? And this is what Gilbert and I were talking about, right? Is like our young people are going to be so important for when we are going to talk about how do you interrupt the system and really look at sustainable change. And what I hear you saying, Nicole, is that really putting us in someone else's shoes, right? And that requires humility, it requires intentionality, it requires a level of empathy, and it does change how we see what we do next. And so starting with young people, what a great way to do that. And we're not saying indoctrinate young kids, because I know a lot of times that is very, as a parent, right, I'm very concerned about other people teaching my kids. But I do recognize that there are some moral imperatives and some values as humans that we do need to have as conversations in our school systems. And being an educator at the heart, it is something that actually has made a huge difference for many of our children who are great citizens now, because they had experiences to know what it means to know what my brother and sister next to me, their experience is, versus the teasing that Leo talked about, right? Versus the bullying that's happening. And so giving that lived experience is huge. And I'm going to challenge all of you to push yourself daily to put yourself in the shoes of someone different, because you live in a community where every day you're interacting with someone who's different, less fortunate, and there is something we can do, and it takes a small amount of time. It's typically pretty free, just even to uplift some of our community members who have never heard that you don't have to feel helpless nor hopeless, right? You have enough. I love Barbara said, I made a friend out there. Make another friend. Because that might be you might be the only person that gives someone a sense of hope in a community where people have felt like for generations, by the way, which is what I also heard. So I want to acknowledge just our Facebook Live folks who have joined us. There was a few comments, just want to acknowledge them. There's no questions that we'll address, but I do want to just honor because they joined us as well. So I want to just have an opportunity just to read the comments that were shared. You want me to go ahead and read them? All right. All right. So thank you again, Facebook Live families and community members. So just a couple things. When you all were talking about language, by the way, you got everyone fired up. So that's where this sense comes from. So apologies, I didn't get to address it at the time. But again, immigration is one of the biggest problems here. This is America. We have that already. I am a first-generation migrant child. I was punished in school for speaking English. U.S. non-English speaking students were sent to different buildings in the very back of the school. There's always a way to communicate. I would like to organize an event to get to know our neighbors. I can provide my contact information for those, and so again, this is Maria Carrillo Dallin, who is a community member who has lived this experience, but also has organized to try to support the vulnerable communities, and language is definitely one you can see based on those comments. So I want to thank you all for this opportunity to just have a dialogue. The next steps, I actually wanted to pass to our fearless leaders. So a final comment would be great, Supervisor. Way to volunteer as we get ready to close out. But really just appreciate the dialogue.
Is this thing tracking me? Okay. Thank you. First things first, next steps. I guess we need some. Let's talk about that. What do you got?
So our next steps now are to not only do a debriefing of this particular forum, but then we will be putting together a report for the Board of Supervisors as the full committee and the folks that have been engaged with us to make recommendations of how to possibly move this work forward. But the Community Vision Forum Committee itself is winding down because this was our last event. This was what our charge was. But we will be coming to the board with a report and recommendations, and then it's up to the board to decide how we move forward from there. Does that cover it, Matthew?
Well said.
And then I'll just add my little thing. When this first started, again, I had to get taught. Oh, we're doing some DEI stuff. What's DEI? Such as the privilege of white ignorance, if not white privilege. But it's important work, and so first things first. If you're like myself, you're feeling a little uncomfortable tonight. That's a good thing. That's a really good thing. You know, and just the work I've been the limited work I've been able to do with this committee and some of the members, they have spoken their truth to me. And I think what I need to do, and I'm trying to do, is just go back. I'm one of the old guys now. I'm one of the generation getting ready to pass this on to the next generation. And when you look back at your own life, and you say, man, I wasn't connecting the dots. You know, I'm going to put this stuff up here on the sheets. We're going to be talking about building community. We're going to be talking about lifting people up. And then I'm going to go home to my very isolated neighborhood, primarily white, and I'm going to feed the dogs, and I'm going to go back and watch the video someday. I grew up in a very divided city Fresno, very racially divided city. I found out later, after I was grown up, that we had a house that was originally in a red line district. It was supposed to be sold only to white people, and in mid-50s Fresno, that's exactly what happened. Just over the railroad tracks, it was not a red line district, much more diverse, and today, much more dangerous. Literally, I can go to look at my old house 2 blocks over the tracks. If I walked over there, I'd be in gang territory, getting ready to get shot because of the color of my skin, among other things. What do you take with that? And now Fresno has evolved. It's this great marketplace, this melting place of cultures and ideas, not just Latinx, African American, but so many other cultures, Greek, Armenian, Basque. You want some good Basque food, you got to go to Fresno. But you know, just because we have diversity in cuisine doesn't mean we have diversity of experience in Fresno. And it remains very much a racially divided, violent city. Most of you aren't old enough to remember, but the civil rights era of the 60s, I'm in part a product of that because I was bused for 2 years when I was in elementary school. We had court-ordered mandatory desegregation of our schools because they were so broken up. And how much of that took, I don't know. But I think it developed empathy because we went to some pretty troubled schools, and it was very much my first experience dealing with other African-American children. And but even in that, we stuck to our little groups. There wasn't as much dialogue as you would think. Court-ordered busing was not seen as a solution long-term because you can force the kids to go there, but can you really force them to develop empathy? I'm here to share with you that I didn't build lifelong connections with African Americans or other minority groups out of that. I totally lived a life that many people in my shoes did. But did I develop empathy through those 2 years of court-ordered busing? I hope to think that I did. I like to think that I did. And my challenge to you now is to challenge me back. Force me and my colleagues on the board, force our other support groups, our non-governmental organizations, tribal health, our environmental justice leaders, those who want to rename the wrongs of the past. Challenge us, keep our feet to the fire, make us uncomfortable, because that is the starting point of this dialogue. It is not the end of this dialogue. And so, it seems dumb, but I want to apologize for all the isolation and just stupidity. Just since we started this, I've listened to people, even among our native populations, when you're talking among the white people, sure enough, the Indian word pops up more often than not. And from some people who are in enough positions of power, they should know better. They haven't been challenged. And so in my journey as a white person up and down the Central Valley, dealing with my other white friends and stuff like that, when they were speaking crap, did I challenge them often enough? Did I speak truth to their power? And the honest truth is I didn't, because it's like, who has the time to deal with all the people spouting crap out their mouths any given day? And we talked about that a little bit in the white sheets. Conflict avoidance. Don't feel uncomfortable. That little boy who's bullied in school, my predecessor on the board, one reason she left is she felt bullied. You know, these lessons, we keep repeating them time and over again. The difference here is that we did get challenged through your work, through Matthew's work. And so I just want to end on that. I obviously don't have solutions. I'm probably not even qualified to ask most of the right questions, but I appreciate the discomfort. And I encourage other people in our community, our largely white community, to join me in that feeling of discomfort so that we can start meaningful work to lift up our communities, all of our communities, in a way that will make us proud for future generations. Thank you.
People spouting crap out their mouth, they didn't give.
Oh, well, I think some
We gotta
background
act
noise.
again.
All right. Well, we are at 8:45, and I want to say that in our closing, I think, I don't know how long the doors are open here for us to stay and continue our conversation, but for the sake of our forum, we do have to come to an end. But I hope, and just thank you for sharing that. Very, very powerful, and I have not heard closing comments like that in a very long time, and is so needed. And I just appreciate you acknowledging the pain of the community, and no blame or shame to anybody, right? But once we know better, as Dr. Maya Angelou said, we do better, right? And that's all this is about. So thank y'all for allowing myself, Dr. Holt, to just be a part of your community. This means a lot as a person, but also as a professional, to see the work happening. Stay encouraged. We always say that, stay encouraged, and we're here for the long haul with you as you move this work along the journey. So thank you all for your time. We'll stay here and hang out a little bit longer if you want to talk afterwards, but we do want to honor the time for those that needed to go at 8:30. Just thank you again.